So today's agenda will be very, very simple. We're just going to take up a feature that was recently introduced, and we're going to see some of the whats and the whys, and then we'll see what exactly are some of the use cases of that feature. And then finally, we'll see some of the pro tips, basically best practices that you need to be following when you're using this feature. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. Again, if you have any questions during the session, please feel free to use the chat box and then post your questions there. Even if I can't get to your questions, I'll make sure I'll answer each one of them, and then we'll send an email with my responses. All right. So we'll start with what and why of perspectives before we jump into the actual demo, right? So what is perspectives? That's the hero of the session, right? So what is perspectives? So this diagram or this image here exactly represents what perspective is. So it's basically submodels. You create submodels from the main model. And so far, traditionally with Sisense, what you've been doing to achieve that is duplicate it as another elastic cube or live model, and then trim it up, and then get to the point where you want it to. And then again, rebuild or republish the model. So this basically has a lot of shortcomings, a lot of cons. So the answer to that question is, what is perspectives? Perspectives lets you to just create submodels without you having to just duplicate the model, right? So in this image, if you see this one person who is probably the data admin or the owner of the data model, who's looking at the entire model, and then you have different persona of users who only want to see one subset of the actual or the bigger model. So for each persona of users or each type of users, you just create a submodel and then share it, and they're all stored in one single data model. And that is what perspective lets you do, right? You don't have to maintain multiple different models, but it's just one model under the data tab. And then now you'll be able to create multiple submodels, share multiple submodels to different set of people whom it would sound logical, and then just help you maintain that easily, right? And from the front end, if you're creating a dashboard, you can now just connect directly to perspective and then start creating your dashboard. You don't have to connect to the main data model and then find your way out. Rather, just simply use the perspective that your data designers or data admins had created, which will just cater to your use case. And then you can just start working on that, which will give you easy access to the right data that you need. So that is what is perspectives as a feature. Okay, so moving on to the whys. Okay, so before we see the demo, the whys are really important. I mean, right now, with the traditional way of data modeling, why do we actually need Sisense? I here have 3 points that explains why we need perspectives. The first point is big and complex data, right? And nowadays, we're just seeing this with all our customers, pretty much 98% of the customers who have like larger data models. It's no longer just a couple of spreadsheets brought into the data model and used for creating dashboards. It's just like at least 20 tables, and 50 tables are becoming really, really common now. So when the data becomes more complex, when the data structure of your strategy of yours becomes bigger, then what is something that we need to do? Of course. So what? You basically need to give the data designers the ability to just create logical portions so you can break down a big and complex data set into smaller and more accessible or easily understandable portions of data tables, right? Anybody who's just given a data source of 50 tables will find it really hard to just create a couple of widgets that they need. Rather, just give them a data model with 10 tables, they'll easily be able to work their way out. Otherwise, it's just too much overload of information on one single person who's trying to design a dashboard, and it's just going to take a lot of time. So that's the first why. The second why is higher demand for self-service. You want your users to manage their own stuff, right, on a daily basis. You don't want someone getting requirements, creating dashboards, and then publishing it. The cycle of this being done is just too much. And then the go-to-market is also definitely hampered by this. So you want your end users to be to be really self-driven, right? So you want them to just use the data model, and then you just want them to build the reports that they need. So that way you can actually enable your users, give more power to your users that they can do their thing and then just get the insights that they need. And for that, what do we need? We definitely need to enable them as easy as possible. We need to have a data strategy that actually supports this kind of end user enablement for self-service. So that is the second why for perspectives. And the third why is, of course, there are more demand. There's definitely more demand, and there are more rapid changes on the data model. And when you change a huge data model, that'll affect all of the users that are using that huge data model. Rather, if you have logical portions, and if you just have these rapid changes going on in 1 out of the 10 portions that you have, then only the users that are using that one small portion will be affected. And the others who are using the remaining 9 portions will just have a smooth way of building their own stuff on a daily basis and will not be disturbed by these rapid changes. So because of that, it'll just make your life easy as a data admin or data designer, and then it makes your users' life also easier, so they don't have to get disrupted because of all these changes. So that reduces support, and you don't have to just go on on a daily basis to make sure that everybody is aware of the changes that you do to the whole model. Rather, you can just take a subset of users, let them know, and then just manage it easier. So this way, you can use perspectives for all these 3 whys, right? The obvious answer to all these 3 whys or the questions is perspectives. You can, of course, create logical portions. Second, you can have a different data strategy, have different perspectives shared with the right people. And then once you have those perspectives, and if the perspectives are shared with the right groups, then your support on performance issues and your growth is also accelerated, and your maintenance is just very, very, very low compared to a larger data model that caters to all of your end users. So if you're a data admin or an admin or the owner of such an Elastic Cube or such a data source, what are some of the problems that you might face when you go for a single model approach? A single model approach basically is having this whole data model and then sharing it with all your users. And if you can see, this data model contains 3 business modules: the store, the web, and then the catalog, right? And there are so many joins going just everywhere. So the first problem is, if you have a small change done to one of these 3 tables or 3 business modules, then all your users are being affected. That is a huge problem. All your dashboard designers will not be able to just move ahead with their dashboard development. Even if they do, they might run into some issues. So that's the first bigger problem. And then comes the support and enablement. So if you have this big of an Elastic Cube or a data source, it just is hard to even maintain as an admin, right? If something goes off, if you want to find out what's going on, then it's hard to just come here and then just study through all these joins, all these tables, and then figure out what's going on. That's one. And then the other one is enablement, right? For the dashboard designers to understand what really is going on and how really would I be able to move forward in creating my use case. That is going to take a lot of them a lot of time for them to even understand what's going on and what tables to use. Would I get the right results? Are all dim tables joined to all fact tables? So questions like these will keep coming time and again, and then you might have to just keep enabling your users again and again. And people who only want to build a dashboard, let's say, of the store module, will have to understand what implications will web module have, what will catalog module have, and their dependencies. So the enablement becomes really, really tedious here. And the third pain point is performance, right? When you have these many going on, and if there is a dashboard designer who picks incorrect tables on their widget, then you're just going to trigger a very bad query path. For example, you have someone creating catalog sales dashboard, and then they're using this, and then in the dashboard filter, they're just adding web page, and then they're just filtering for web page. What happens? So that'll create a crazy random query path, which might cause performance issues. So these things could just hamper the performance of not only that dashboard, but of the whole system. So this might be a bigger problem than we think. So single data model approach has all these many issues, right? Okay, so what's the other alternate solution? Maybe break it down into 3 different elastic cubes, have store sales, store returns, and its fact tables in one data model. So basically this plus all the DIMs, and then have web sales, web returns, call the elastic cube as web, and then call this as catalog. So I have 3 different elastic cubes: store EC, web EC, catalog EC. Have the required dimension tables in those 3 elastic cubes and create a multi-model approach, right? Now you have 3 different elastic cubes. Now you have to maintain all these 3 different elastic cubes individually. Let's say you have a common table like warehouse or customer demographics. If you're creating a custom column to any of these 2 tables or any of these global DIM tables, then you have to manually update all 3 data models. And let's go to data security. Let's say you have data security on customer address or a customer table, right? And if you want to update that data security, now you have to go to 3 different elastic cubes, update data security to all of these 3 elastic cubes individually, right? So even though you can do things using REST APIs, it's still a lot of effort and a lot of duplicated effort to just do something on one elastic cube and then just copy over from that elastic cube to the 2 other elastic cubes, right? When you follow a multi-model approach. So there are 2 approaches, or there were 2 approaches before Perspectives came into picture, and the pain points are basically this for both those approaches. So the answer to all these pain points is, of course, we know the answer. The answer to that is Perspectives. Yes, Perspectives. With Perspectives, you can manage this type of use case pretty well, pretty smartly. And if you see, I will create 3 perspectives, 1 using store sales, 2 using web sales, and 3 using catalog sales. So I take this whole model as the root model. When I mean root model, that's the term that we use for the main data model that you used to have before Perspectives, right? So that will contain all of the tables, all of the joins. And then you can create additional submodels called perspectives within the root model. So this is the solution for all the pain points that you saw on the previous slide. And if you see here, we are creating A, B, C, 3 perspectives. The first perspective being the store sales, second perspective being the web sales, and the third perspective being the catalog sales. It doesn't stop here. Now, after creating these perspectives, the store sales perspective can just be shared with the designers who want to create dashboards on the store data, and then web sales to just the users who want to create dashboards using web data, and then catalog sales to catalog users. So things that you need to know here are, what's a root model? The root model is basically the main data model that we used to have even before Perspective inside Sisense. So that's now called the root model. And then any submodel that you create under that root model is called perspectives. And you can create any number of perspectives today. And then the perspectives will inherit a lot of things from your root model, right? All right, so let me switch over to a quick demo of what I'm talking about. I'll just show you what is how can a perspective be created, what should you be using, and all that stuff right now. So as you can see, that's the same data model. I've just arranged it in a different way. There's web, there's store sales and returns, and then there's catalog sales and returns, and you have all of these DIM tables. These are the global DIMs, and then these are the local DIMs, which are not connected to all of the fact tables, right? So I've created another copy just to work during the session. So this is exactly the same elastic cube as this. So now let me show you where the perspective button is right here. You don't have to enable anything under the feature management, you just install the latest version, which contains perspectives, and you'll be, it'll be auto-enabled on both Elastic Cubes and live models. Just to save some time with the builds, I am using a live model right now, but you can also create perspectives, and the UI is all going to be exactly the same in your Elastic Cube and in the live model. There's absolutely no change in the UI between perspective on a live model and perspective on an Elastic Cube. Now, let me click on this plus perspective. That is the button that will let you create a perspective, right? So now I will create a perspective for, what shall we create it for? Let's do web. Yep. Or let's do web. So let me add, so here, okay, let me move this. Okay, so here you first have to give the perspectives a name. I'll just call it web sales demo. And then nice little description for everyone to understand, because people can't, people who have edit access to this Elastic Cube or live model will be able to edit your perspectives too. If they have edit access to the model, they will have edit access to the model and its perspectives. So you need to have a nice little description that will explain why this perspective was created. Was created to isolate only the web data. Okay, and then now in this list, we basically have to choose the tables that will go inside the submodel, right? Of course, I'm gonna choose web returns. And when you choose a table, or when you select a table here, the fields within that table get auto-selected. I just expanded the list, and you can see that all of these fields are being auto-selected, right? If you don't want a couple of fields to be selected, you can just deselect like this, or you can just not use the table level selection and just pick the fields that you need, right? That is also another option. So for simplicity purposes, I'm gonna pick all of the fields under a certain table. So I'll take web returns, I'll take web sales, and then I'll pick some of the DIM tables that are common and that are local. The local ones are web page and website. Web page, website, and I'm gonna also pick some common ones like item, customer. Okay. I'm gonna pick customer. What else can I pick? Customer, maybe. Yeah, and then you can, and then of course we'll pick some date dim or time dim. We'll pick date dim. Okay, I've not picked all of the fields, and you can see here the tables that I just picked grayed out, right? For some reason, call center was picked. I did not select the call center table. Okay, not sure why that's grayed. Oh, that's because that's the last table that I clicked on. Cool. Yeah, now it looks good. So these are the tables that I had picked for my perspective: web sales, web returns, and then date dim, customer, item, and then two other local dim tables: web page and website, right? So once you're done selecting the tables and fields, of course, and create perspective button is right here, and that will create perspective. There you go. So you got web returns, web sales. So this is like making changes to your data model, right? If you're using an Elastic Cube, you might have to build it. If you're using a live model, then you will have to publish it again so that you can use it in the front end, which means on the dashboards, right? Now I've created, but you see how the joins were just, joins got propagated or joins got inherited into the model. It is not an auto feature. It happened because I included the fields that made the join in the perspective. Let's say if you had deselected date SK or WR return date SK from web returns, then this join will not come through. So it's not just picking tables, which will pick the joins. You have to pick the tables and make sure you have the join fields picked in your perspectives selection so that the joins are inherited. So I'll just quickly show you an example. I'll go to web returns and I'll go ahead and deselect So you can clearly see, you can see this join icon here, the intersection icon here, which says that it is used for a join. And if you hover over it, it'll say what it's joined to, right? Let's say I just deselect it and then hit done. The moment I do that, the join between web returns and date dim will just disappear. There you go. That's exactly what happened. So you need to have the fields that make the joins selected in order for the joins to propagate from your root model into the perspective. Okay, so if you just select the table as a whole, which selects all of the columns, then it's just a given that you will get all the joins propagated. Again, you need to have both the tables for the joins to come in. Just because you brought in web returns, it doesn't bring all of the web returns joins. It would only bring the joins of web returns to the other tables in the perspective. Okay, so I've made changes to this perspective. Let me go publish so I can use it in the front end. Let me go publish it. That's it. I just published it. And now I got this dropdown, right? Which has my root model and which has my web sales demo perspective. I can just click on it and make changes anytime I wish. And I can share my perspectives individually, manage hierarchies on the perspectives individually. And if I want to delete perspective, of course, I can delete perspective, right? So if I want to share, this is just auto sharing my perspective to the people who have edit access or who have access to the root model. So, and then you can just simply share perspective and then say, okay, I'm going to share to this person. And then I'll say can use, and then maybe to another person, and then say can read, which basically gives the person access to see any dashboards, but can't create any dashboards. So if I save it, and if I go to the root model and look at the share of the root model, it will not have the individual users who had access to the perspective in here, because this is at the root model level. Only 2 people have access to edit. But if I give access to someone here, do I have another 2? I'll use something here and then say, okay, this person can read the whole root model. And then if I go to web sales demo and then open the share perspective, you will not see that person in here because those things do not propagate. People who have edit access, of course, will have edit access to the root model and the perspectives. But if it's just a read or use access at the root model, they will not have auto access to all the perspectives under the root model. You will have to explicitly give access to the perspectives and the root model if it's just a read or use. Read use means it's just using or reading the data to create and view dashboards in the front end. It's just not dashboards, it's also related to notebooks, but let's not get into those nitty-gritties right now. So if it's a read or use, it has to be exclusive. If it's edit and if it's given at the root model level, it just propagates to all of the perspectives under the root model. That's our takeaway. So we haven't made any big changes. So I'll just go to the root model, and then I think I've published it already so many times. I'll go to here, and then let's create a new dashboard. Now let's search for demo, right? So web sales demo is what we created right now, right? That is our web sales demo is the name of the perspective, and there you go, web sales demo. So if you can see, this just behaves as yet another data source. For your end designers, they will not know whether they're connecting to a perspective or to a data model. They'll just see that as a data source. If it's live, of course, you'll have this lightning symbol. If it's an elastic cube, you'll have this cube symbol. But otherwise, they'll not be able to differentiate between a perspective and a model, right? So this just avoids a lot of confusion. And then there you go, plus select data, and then you have customer, item, and I can show you if I search for web, you'll see web returns, web sales. But if I search for store, you will not see anything because the store tables did not come through to the perspective. So this is a quick demo of Perspectives. I'll just open it up for quick questions, just maybe one question this time. We are at the halfway mark, and then we'll continue with the use cases that I want to present, and then we'll wrap it up with some best practices. Questions? Okay, I see a question from the chat. Can you select specific rows from table? No, you can't. You can't select specific rows. I think what you're getting at is, can we add a filter to a perspective to just filter for specific set of data? That's still not a feature with perspectives. Maybe in future we might come up with that, where you can create your own import queries for the perspective tables. But as of now, you can't add any row level filters to the perspectives. It's just picking your tables and fields from the root model. That is what the perspectives can do. Cool. That was a good question. Thank you for bringing that up, Dennis. All right, so I'll just move on. So now let's see some of the use cases. These use cases are not just created by me. These were use cases that we had our customers do or ask about, and then we made sure we added it to this, right? The first use case is a very simple use case, right? End designer groups with limited field visibility. We are going to use the same exact data model for our perspective use cases. You have web, you have store, you have catalog, and then remember we have global DIMs, and then we have local DIMs, right? So now the same customer or the customer has this huge data model with 3 different business modules. Now they have 3 different business groups, the catalog, store, and web, and they want to only share the tables and fields for their end designers to create just a store dashboard or a web dashboard or a catalog dashboard, right? So the main data model is sales and returns, which is, we can consider the single model as our sales and returns data model. And the 3 user groups are web, catalog, store, accessing those modules. So that's the need. You only want to share the fields that they should be seeing to the end designer so they can create their dashboards without any confusion. So, before perspectives or without perspectives, how can you approach this problem? There are 2 ways to approach this problem. I think we did see that before. One of those approaches is something that we saw before, which is nothing but creating 3 different models, right? You create a sales model, you create a web model, you create a catalog model, you create a store model, and then you share each of those models to the right end user group, and they'll only be able to see the tables and the fields that they're supposed to see. Or another approach today without perspectives is using column level security premium plugin. You can say, okay, this user group can only see these columns. Basically, web user group can only see the web columns. You pick and choose the fields that only the web user group can see, and then you can configure it accordingly, and the same configuration can be repeated for catalog and store. But the major problem with that, the first approach with 3 models, maintenance is an overhead. We did see that already, so I'm not going to touch base on that again. But the second solution here is column level security. But the problem with column level security is the configuration, right? So the configuration is going to be a real problem. And also, when you keep adding more and more tables, you just have to go back to the column level security configuration, and then you got to keep updating that over and over again. And let's say if a table can be accessed by 2 user groups, then it adds another level of complexity when you're using the column level security approach. So these are some of the approaches that you can use, but they have a lot of cons. So the best answer to this question or to this use case is use perspectives. It's very simple, right? The one that we just saw, create 3 perspectives, web, catalog, store, shared with the respective user groups, so that now as a designer, I will just be able to see my data. For example, this is my dashboard, right? And this is my dashboard, and let's say, am a web sales or a web user group user, right? So if I want to create a dashboard, and if I want to just type in quantity, right now, I'll only see 1 quantity for sales and 1 quantity for returns, right? And then if I just sum it, I'll just get, sure what's going on. Quantity. Oops. If I choose the sales quantity here and then sum it, I get 1.24 billion for just web sales. But if it was my single model approach, right? Let me create a new dashboard and just choose the single, right? So this contains all of the 3 business modules. And if I am just a web user or a user who can design dashboards for web sales and returns, now if I go here, type in quantity, I get catalog, store, web, and then it's confusing. I mean, not straight away confusing right here, but the moment I choose this, and then if I want to select filters, then it's becoming a hard time, right? So should I use call center or not? I'm not sure, right? Should I use catalog page? Should I use another dim like customer? I'm not sure whether it's a common dim to my web sales web fact tables, but rather if I have a perspective connected to my dashboard, and if I'm trying to create a filter like this, whatever filter that I see, I am pretty sure that those are common to the fact table that I'm using. So I'll be able to just use any of the DIMs that are available without any confusion. So as a data designer, it just makes my life easy. And if I create one filter when I'm using another table as a fact table, and if they're not directly connected, then I'll run into serious problems with performance. And that will not just affect me as an end user, it'll affect the platform's performance as a whole, which is a huge headache to anyone who's managing the platform, like an admin or a data admin, right? So all these problems can be avoided if we use perspectives and share the perspectives to the right user group. The reason why you're seeing different numbers here is because I have a data security defined on this data model, which will be used for one of the use cases later. Cool. So that is our first use case, which is a very preliminary or a simple use case, but this is pretty powerful. That's the main use case of Perspectives 2. The second use case is restricting data further at the user group level. Now we have already restricted the field's visibility to the user level. But what if I have another restriction, let's say a geographical restriction, where a user can only see a specific country's data, and another group within web or catalog can see another group of countries? If that is your use case, if you're trying to restrict the data within a business module, then how can we do that? So without perspectives, I mean, here's an example of the question where you only need US and Canada web to see US and Canada web sales and returns, and you have another group called UK stores who can only see store module data for country UK, and let's say you have another group called UK web who can only see the web data for UK. So it's further restriction of data into a certain business module. In this case, without perspectives, earlier we used to create 3 data models. One for web, one for catalog, one for store. And then what we used to do is we used to have data security rules on all 3 data models. We did talk briefly about this use case, but that is what we used to do before Perspectives, where you have 3 data security rules defined at 3 different data models. Let's say you're updating your data security to something else, or you're adding more rules, then you have to go into individual Elastic cubes thrice and then make those changes. Even though we can use REST APIs, that is still a lot of duplicated effort, as we spoke about that earlier, but that used to be our go-to before Perspectives. But now with Perspectives, all you need to do is have 3 perspectives, one for catalog, web, and store, and have the row level security defined at the root model level. Let me show you what that means. This is the data model that we're working on, right? Cool. So this is the data model that we're working on. It's the same data model. And we have 3 perspectives already created. And the data security is at the customer table. It's right here. And the data security says the admins can see a couple of countries, and then 2 other users can see 2 other countries, and then all other groups, nothing. So this is the data security rule that's defined at the root model. If you can see, I am at the root model. But if I go into, let's say, catalog sales, I have all the catalog tables picked inside this perspective. And if I go inside the customer, I can actually see data security here, which means if I bring in this table and the field that contains data security from the root model, the data security automatically propagates into the perspective, right? So this contains perspective, and I can quickly show you what I'm talking about with the help of a dashboard. I've created a dashboard here using catalog sales perspective, and you can see catalog sales perspectives used. And the sales country is restricted. Since I am an admin of the system, I can see USA and Canada. And even inside the perspectives, I can only see USA and Canada. And let's assume if you don't bring in, if you're still bringing in country table, but if you're not bringing in the field, or if you're not bringing in the country table at all inside a perspective, then the data security will not propagate. This is a very, very important point to note. So if you want the data security to propagate, you need to bring actually bring in the field and the table that contains data security. Let me just show you quickly what I'm talking about. I am going to go to the root model, add a perspective, and then I'm going to call this as catalog, no security. And I am going to pick the catalog tables, page and sales. Oops, not catalog, page and sales. Okay, catalog returns as well. And then maybe I'll bring in one more table for dim. It's item. And then let me create a perspective, right? Now I've brought in just 3 tables. The table that contains data security is the customer table, and the customer table is not in this perspective. So I'm going to publish it. So you can see here that this is connected to catalog sales, which contains the customer table. So data security is applied. I'm going to create a widget with total quantity, and you can see for yourself as to how the data security flows from the main or the root model. So I'm going to choose no security table or no security perspective. And then I'm going to create a dashboard, add a text plus widget. And then I am going to choose quantity. So it's the sales quantity. Let me make sure it is sales quantity. I just want it to be apples versus apples. Quantity from catalog sales. Quantity from catalog sales. That's exactly what I need. And then I create. Now, if you compare the numbers, this is 22.52 million, and this is 2.46 billion. The reason why this is a higher number than this is because this is just the number of all countries, and this is just a number for just the 2 countries selected as data security. So even though you create perspectives under a root model that contains data security, you need to have the table that contains data security in your perspective. So I'm going to edit this perspective, and then I'm going to include the customer table that contains data security, right? The moment I do that, I'm going to hit done, and then I've changed something. So I'll need to make sure that I publish the data model. Yes, published. And now if I refresh, I'm going to see the data matching with my catalog sales. There you go, 22.52, 22.52. So the major takeaway here is if you want your perspectives to respect your data model, then you just need to have the table and the field that has the data security from your root model added to your perspectives. That is the major takeaway. So I'm gonna leave the floor open for questions. Any questions before we move on to some of the best practices? Questions? Let's take one question. Nothing's on the chat. Any questions? Okay. No questions. Cool. So we did see two major use cases of perspectives. Next, I'm going to dive deeper into the last part of today's session, which is pro tips using perspectives. It's nothing but the best practices. I have 4 best practices to share with you, and these 4 best practices can be really, really handy when you're using perspectives. All right. The first pro tip or the first best practice is that is something that's very, very I mean, it's exactly the last use case that we just saw, right? When you want to have data security flow from your root model into the perspective, you need to make sure the table or the field on which the row level security was defined in the root model is added to the perspective. If you don't add that, then it will be a problem. So I got a very okay, I got a question that's connected to this pro tip on the chat. Somebody asked, will there be a warning if yes, there will be a warning that's coming up in the next or one release, 2 releases later. So we are going to come up with a warning that would say, we're still working on it. And then we're still thinking on what's the best way to present to the end designers of the data model. So there will be a warning in the future which says, you are leaving out data security, which means it's a problem, and it would just give you a warning. And if you accept it, it'll let you continue with the perspective creation. That was a great question. Thanks, David. And yeah, I think that was the question, right? Cool. So thanks for the question. So remember this, right now we don't have a warning, so you will have to be really careful when you're creating perspective. When you have data security on the root model, just make sure the table and the field that contains the data security is added to the perspective. Even if you just leave out the other fields of the customer table, for example, in this screenshot, if you leave out the other fields, just add the country field, which contains the actual data security. And you can clearly see, oops, not that one. You can clearly see that here you will have a small icon which says this contains data security, right? All you need is just the sales country added to the perspective for the data security to flow. All right. So if you do that, then the data security will automatically just propagate into all your perspectives and keep your perspectives secure. Cool. And the reason why we had left it open is because there are customer use cases where they want to create perspectives. Maybe that could be used for benchmarking. And for benchmarking, you don't need data security affecting the benchmarking or the perspectives that is used for benchmarking, right? In that case, you need to avoid data security intentionally. And that is why, and that is the main reason or one of the major use cases why we kept this open. So if you want data security, add the data security table / field. If you don't want it, then just leave it out, right? So the option is yours, so you can use it appropriately for your use cases. So, okay, second pro tip. When you have 2 fields that's making up a join, if you want the join to be brought inside the perspective, then you need to select both those fields. This is also something that we saw earlier. If you leave out the field that's making up a join, then your join is not going to be propagated. Even though the table comes into the perspective, the joins will not make it into the perspective. For the join to make it, you need to add the fields, the 2 fields from both the tables into the perspective so you can see the join that was in your root model. And a very, very popular question here is, how can I bring in a couple of tables and then change the joins in perspective? And the answer to that question is you cannot really do that today. The perspectives do not have the ability to modify joins. The joins are either inherited or not inherited from your root model. If you bring in the fields that make the join will come into your perspective. If you leave out the field or one of the 2 fields that make up a join, the join will not make it to your perspective. That is all the control that you have on these joins. You cannot really alter the joins inside perspectives. The joins are basically not editable inside a perspective. And I can real quick show you. you can just click on it and then just edit it. It would just be blank, right? You can really not edit your perspective. I mean, perspective joins. I mean, joins inside a perspective. It's all inherited or not inherited from your root model. The third pro tip is my favorite, of course. That's because this actually will set up the best practice for the entire organization if you're going to use perspectives, right? So all your data designers can follow this, which is a very, very simple tip. Do not use the root model for any of your dashboard design. What I would recommend is consider the root model as your repository, right? Root models are your repository of tables, and do not share your root models with anyone to use or read. So you shouldn't have anyone here, like let's say, let me add my user, and then they should not have this use or read. They can have edit privileges at the root model level, but nobody should have use or read, which will let them use it or read it. I mean, if from the front end, basically can be used to create dashboards or view dashboards. It should not be a permission of the root model. Again, Sisense will let you do it. We are going to let you do it, but the best practice is just stay away from doing it. Right? If you have perspectives, do not use the root model as one of the perspective. If let's say you have a case where you want to create a perspective with all of the tables in the root model, just create it. Just create another perspective that is just the root model itself. Then just call it all tables or something. So you can just have the entire model be used as a perspective, but just do not touch the root model, which will help you maintain things better. Right? Because the root model is, the root model is the parent model for all of your perspectives. Let's say you added, you use it as a dashboard data model. And if you want to make a change, if you delete a join, that deletes the join inside all of the perspectives that are dependent to it. Rather, if you create another perspective with all of the tables, all of the joins, and if you make any changes to that perspective, it's not going to affect any of the other perspectives. So do not touch the root model. Once you create it, once you've joined the tables, just leave it. If you want to add more tables, add it to the root model and use it as your repository of tables and joins, and use your perspectives for dashboards. The last pro tip is is basically naming convention, right? As I showed you, an end designer who's designing a dashboard will not know whether a data source is a perspective or is a root model or is just a data model without perspectives underneath it. It would just all look the same. The only differentiation there is whether it's a live model or an elastic cube. If it's a live model, of course, you know what the difference between a live model and an elastic cube is. That is the only thing that they can make out from the screen, which lets them create a dashboard, right? The moment you create a new dashboard, you're not going to see what's a perspective, what's not, right? But we know for a fact that these are perspectives, and let's say the single model. This is a data model without perspective, or basically a root model. And then catalog sales. These are basically your perspectives, but there's no differentiation. So if you want your users to know what's a perspective and what's not a perspective, then I would strongly recommend you to have your naming conventions accordingly. Okay. If you want your users to know whether it's a perspective or not, then just say, okay, this is the perspective from, or you cannot add a description because the description is not available on the front end. So you need to be smart about the perspective name that's available for your end designers. And that was my last best practice. And that brings us to the end of the session, right? We still have 4 more minutes. I can take a couple of questions here. But before that, I want to bring this light to you and then just ask for your feedback of this session. Your feedback really, really matters, and it helps us improve daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly. So your feedback matters. Please leave your feedback for us if you found this session useful. You can scan this QR code, or you can use the link on the chat, which I'm going to paste right now. Okay, it's in the chat. Oh, Katie has already shared it. Okay, you beat me by a few seconds. Cool. So I'm gonna hang out here for another 3 minutes for any questions that you have regarding perspectives, regarding what we discussed. But don't worry about it. If you get any questions later, you can either reach out to your CSM or you can reach out to one of us, and we'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions related to perspectives. All right. Okay. Oh, the naming conventions again? Sure. This is I mean, again, I am not recommending a specific naming convention. All I'm saying is you have to come up with a naming convention within the data designers and data model owners, and then use it across your environment. So which will help your end users and not make them confused. If you follow a certain naming convention and if a few don't, then it would just create chaos. So before you start using perspectives, just fix on a naming convention for perspectives, and then, or just the data model versus perspectives, and then just go ahead. Okay, the roadmap is handled by product, and we might have a few sessions on roadmap, which your CSMs will let you know about. That'll contain things like what are the features that are coming up in the next few releases. Of course. Okay, so thank you so much, everyone. We will send a follow-up email with a link to the recording session, and we'll also have the presentation uploaded in Sisense Academy for you to review that later. All right, thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and I wish you guys have a great rest of the day. Thank you.